It is 3 a.m. on the East Coast, midnight for our viewers out west. We're still up. Are you? I'm Willie Geist. You're watching MSNBC's continuing election night coverage. Tonight, we're tracking Democratic gains in the House of Representatives. The Democrats needed a net gain, as you know, of 23 seats. Some of those votes still coming in, especially on the West Coast. More on those races in just a moment. But our NBC News decision desk projects Democrats could secure as many as 37 House seats, in the end giving them 230 seats. The Senate, meanwhile, remains in Republican control as expected. Republicans picked up a few seats, including some of the highest profile ones. And let's take a look at some of the results over the course of this night. Ted Cruz in the highest profile race, perhaps, of the Senate campaign, defeating Beto O'Rourke, holding on to his seat in the state of Texas. In Indiana, the Democrat goes down. Donnelly losing to Republican Mike Braun in a state where the president campaigned quite a bit. In North Dakota, another Republican gain as Kevin Cramer defeats Heidi Heitkamp as expected in the state of North Dakota. Marsha Blackburn winning over Phil Bredesen, the congresswoman now a senator-elect in the state of Tennessee. Joe Manchin in a state again where President Trump won by more than 40 points. The Democrat and former governor there, Manchin, holding on to his seat. In Missouri, Claire McCaskill has been knocked off. Josh Hawley, the Republican there, picking up a seat for his party. Claire McCaskill will be out of the Senate come January. Still too close to call in the Arizona Senate race. We're watching this one closely. Martha McSally, the Republican, and Kyrsten Sinema, the Democrat, with a difference of about 22,000 votes right now. And here in this race in Nevada, we've been watching this minute by minute, and we can tell you Dean Heller, the Republican incumbent, has now called the Democrat Jackie Rosen to concede the race. Jackie Rosen is giving her speech right now, guys. We want to listen in. Let's take a listen.
I love you guys, too. But I got to tell you that Catherine endorsed me on day one. And she has done so much to invest in building up our state party. She's doing amazing work, and I can't wait to be her partner and fight for Nevada. Listen to your stories and take them with us as we do good work for all of you. And I want to thank someone else who's been with me since the beginning. You know, Senator Reid had some advice for me when I first ran for Congress. And his advice was simple. He said this: know who you are and why you're running. Stay true to yourself and your values, and be a straight shooter. I appreciate his friendship, guidance, and support, and a straight shooter is what we're going to be. But I have to tell you, I'm a little sentimental tonight because a lot of times you don't get to see bookends in your life. And 40 years ago, I was a young college student working my way through school. And I was a member of 226. But that's not the best part of the story. I was working right down the hall here at Caesar's Palace as a cocktail waitress to pay my tuition. I put my tips in those envelopes, and it paid for my next year of college. And I know it took a while, but 40 years later, I'm back, and here I am. But I think about that young woman then, and I never could have imagined all these years later, really, that I'd be standing here on this stage as your next United States Senator, and that everything that's happened in between. Thank you. You know, I love you guys too. Wait. So, you know, I want to tell you that my faith and my upbringing, they were a big part of my decision to take on this race, because I believe it's our responsibility to leave this world a better place than how we found it. And after all the hate that I've seen recently, that we've all seen, I can't tell you how much this means to me as a former
That's Jackie
Senate Vice
Rosen
President.
speaking in Las Vegas. Dean Heller has called her to concede that race. He is the Republican incumbent. There will be a new senator in the state of Nevada. Steve Kornacki, we've been holding off on this one. It had been too close to call for some time. Fair to say, with that speech, it's over in Nevada.
Yeah, well, you're saying that the votes come in. Once they start coming in Nevada, they come in fast and furious. And it really was this Reno area here right away when that came in. Dean Heller in 2012, remember, Barack Obama was running for re-election, carried Nevada pretty easily. Dean Heller won his Senate seat in 2012. Right. It was a bit of a surprise. It's because he did so well in this part of the state. And yet you see tonight, it's a reverse. Jackie Rosen ends up winning up there. When she's winning up there in what's supposed to be Dean Heller's best part of the state, you know he's in trouble. And then you go down to Las Vegas, by far the biggest part of the state, the Las Vegas area. You see a double-digit lead there for Jackie Rosen. That was pretty much ball game. It's interesting because nationally, the Republicans, if you said at the start of the night the Republicans are going to be gaining multiple seats, you would have said probably, well, surely Dean Heller's going to find a way to survive an incumbent in a close race in Nevada. That must mean it's tilting his way. Republicans are going to pick up multiple seats tonight, even though they are losing a senator in Nevada, and they're in trouble in Arizona as well right now. So a bit of an interesting outcome here, given what we've seen outside of Nevada.
And you're also looking at the state of Montana, where we've had a close eye. John Tester trying to hang on for dear life here by just the thinnest of margins. Let's see what the latest numbers are here.
Let's see if it's changed at all. It has changed a little. 2,300 votes now separating Tester from Rosendale. Here is the interesting thing, though. It does appear, it says 100% is in Missoula County, and this is, University of Montana. This is a big place, big Democratic area. As you can see, it does appear there's more vote coming out of Missoula. The issue here in Montana is there's so much mail-in voting. And in terms of how the vote is actually processed, counted, and how it displays here, that is potentially a very significant boost for Tester in terms of trying to find places where he can make up a 2,300, a little less than 2,300 vote gap. There are other Democratic areas here that have yet to report vote, but Republican areas as well. But that Missoula thing could be key.
Okay, we'll keep a close eye on that. That vote is still out. We want to go back to the state of Nevada. Steve Patterson is at Jackie Rosen's Senate race headquarters in Las Vegas. Steve, a big night for the Democrat.
With Jackie Rosen still on stage, Willie, this was a prime target for the Democrats from minute one because obviously Dean Heller was the only senator running for re-election in a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016. So a big bullseye on this Senate race. She mentioned one of the keys to victory you heard in her speech, the number 226. That is the culinary union here in Nevada. It's one of the biggest organizing bodies in the entire state, 57,000 members strong. Half of those members, more than half, are Latino, more than half are women. The Latino vote, such a key vote in this state. More than 28% of this state is Latino. We've been watching them mobilize over the last few days. We're out several times canvassing them. By their estimate, they did an estimated 400,000 door knocks. That is a supreme amount of coverage in a place like Clark County, which is 70% of the electorate in the state. She won Clark County. She won Washoe County, which was very unexpected. That's where Reno is. That usually goes to Republicans. So she won in key places where she needed.
All right, looks like we lost Steve Patterson in Vegas. We'll see what happens. We'll get him back. Maybe he's going to go out in Vegas. Let's bring in our panel right now. Elise Jordan, MSNBC political analyst, co-host of the Words Matter podcast. Alicia Menendez joins us. She's contributing editor with Bustle, also co-host of Amanpour and Company on PBS, and the co-creator of the Latina to Latina podcast. MSNBC political analyst Eddie Glaude Jr. is with us. Eddie's a professor at Princeton University and the chairman of the Center for African American Studies. Alexi McCammon joining us, reporter for Axios, who's been covering the 2018 midterms. Alan Lichtman is a political historian and a professor at American University in Washington, D.C. Also with us, associate editor for Commentary Magazine and MSNBC contributor, Noah Rothman. Alicia, let's pick up right now on Jackie Rosen's big win. Yep. Big win in the state of Nevada.
So for a long time, there have been Democrats who have argued that Democrats ought to look to the Southwest in order to either expand their map or to build a firewall, because demographically, the Latino growth in the Southwest poses an opportunity. So there was some hope going into tonight that if Democrats could win Nevada, Arizona, Texas, even if they didn't win Texas, but became within striking distance, that it gave credence to that argument that rather than focus on the Midwest and voters in the Midwest, the Democrats could focus on the Southwest, on Latino voters, on voters for whom immigration is a big issue. We have one of the three coming through. If Arizona comes through, I think that thought gets a lot more attention than it's gotten to date.
Texas was close. Arizona, the vote is still out, Elise.
Well, with Nevada specifically, though, I would go back to it was a healthcare vote. This was, you have Dean Heller, who flip-flopped on what he was going to do about repealing Obamacare. He said he was going to stand with the very popular Republican governor and do whatever he wanted and would not vote to repeal, but then he went ahead and did it. And so voters in Nevada have not been that gung-ho about him, and this was seen as a vulnerability and a weak spot. Was he, suddenly he was trying to be very pro-Trump, but in prior statements he hadn't been. So he hedged a bit on that, and that uncertainty also didn't help his political future.
So, Alexi McCammond, if you look at the map drawn by Republicans tonight, yes, Jackie Rosen wins. The Democrat wins in the state of Nevada, but they will be very happy about Texas. They will be very happy about the state of Missouri, where Claire McCaskill went down. They will be very happy about the state of Indiana, where Mike Braun defeated Joe Donnelly. And we'll see as the vote shakes out, they may be particularly happy about the state of Florida.
And all those folks you just mentioned, I think Kavanaugh and his confirmation is a big factor there, because they all, except for Nelson, voted against him, and we don't know about Nelson yet. But I think that is a big part of it. And we saw President Trump really making the GOP closing argument this cycle about the caravan and Kavanaugh, as he kept saying. And, it's not that surprising that these red state Democratic senators fell so quickly, because that's sort of the geography we had been seeing this entire cycle. The two types of incumbents who were facing the biggest uphill battles were House Republicans in districts that Hillary Clinton won in 2016, and these red state Democratic senators who were representing states that President Trump won by large margins in 2016.
So let's bring in now Democratic Senator, speaking of the Senate, Jeff Merkley of Oregon. The senator was not up for re-election this year, but obviously watching very closely tonight, and we'll have some new colleagues in the Senate come January. Senator, we appreciate you being with us at this early or late hour where you are. What's your first reaction to the Senate, the map that's been drawn tonight?
Well, certainly it's very painful to lose a number of my very capable colleagues. I must say, when you look all over at the number of races, the Democrats are still winning essentially 2 out of 3 races for the U.S. Senate. It's just we started with such a map that already had such a large population.
Are you surprised, Senator, by some of the races? Let's take Indiana, for example, or Missouri. Did you hold out hope that Joe Donnelly and Claire McCaskill would hang on?
Yes, certainly did have hope. The races that we've lost were the 4 that we were most worried about. And of course, we're hoping that John Tester can hold on in Montana. And I'm looking forward to the outcome in Arizona. We'd hoped really for a miracle. We wanted to win 80% of the races tonight. We didn't reach that. We didn't reach that goal. But I must say, what we have seen is just a increased polarization of America under the leadership of President Trump. And I think his very intense effort to divide Americans, set them against each other, a fair amount of bigotry and racism coming out of the Oval Office, really is so unhealthy for this country. And I hope we can shift into a very different gear here as we go into the next year.
Well, you did have some disappointments in the Senate, but you must be heartened off what you've just said there by what happened in the House of Representatives tonight. The Democrats take back the reins of the House. They take back the reins of the speakership. They take back the reins of those critical committees that will oversee and push back on the President of the United States. What do you expect the political environment to be like now come January with the Democratic House against President Trump?
Well, I think there will finally be some congressional oversight and accountability for the executive branch, which has been much missing. I also feel like there will be a search for topics that the House and Senate can work on together. I think one of those may well be infrastructure. We thought that would happen 2 years ago. The president decided instead to push the tax bill. rather than investing in infrastructure. But hopefully infrastructure will come back up as an area in much need in America and where maybe Democrats and Republicans can find common ground.
Elise Jordan has a question for you, Senator.
Senator Merkley, you've been very outspoken about the child separation policy of the Trump administration and the horrific conditions on the border. This immigration battle seems like it only hit more of a fever pitch this campaign cycle, with Donald Trump's rhetoric really just going, getting even nastier. And now there's going to be the deployment of 15,000 troops to our border. Do you think that the results of this election repudiated or actually showed the strength of Donald Trump's immigration policy?
Well, I think mostly it repudiated it. Of course, the outcome in the House, very strong. And again, in the Senate, we won basically 2/3 of those Senate races. And you think about this, the administration right now has been floating this idea that they're going to give immigrant families fleeing persecution a choice. And the choice is between inflicting trauma on their children by having their children taken away when they're locked up, or by inflicting trauma on the children by locking them all up together in internment camps. And I had to introduce a bill several weeks ago that was the No Internment Camps in America Act, just to draw attention to this strategy of the administration. I think Americans just are, in general, appalled by this. And certainly I hope we do have a congressional debate about the treatment of those families fleeing persecution abroad. After all, either we fled or our ancestors fled. Almost all of us come from some kind of roots in which our ancestors fled persecution, religious persecution, famine, or war.
All right, Senator Jeff Merkley, Democrat of Oregon, we really appreciate your time tonight. Thanks so much for being with us. We will head to California next to get a check on the big House races out there as our late-night election in Los Angeles is NBC News correspondent Cal Perry, as well as the chief strategist for the Serve America movement, Reed Galen. Reed served as deputy campaign manager for John McCain's presidential campaign and deputy campaign manager for Arnold Schwarzenegger's successful 2006 re-election campaign in California. Cal, take it away.
Hey, Willie, it's a lot easier to stay up with a 3-hour heads up here on the West Coast. Number of races still very tight that we're following live as the votes are continued to be counted here in California. 2 races in particular I want to show you right now. The California 48. This is Orange County. This is Republican establishment candidate Dana Rohrabacher running. Go ahead, Reed, jump on in here. You know this district very well.
Running against Harley Ruda, who, as you know, is a Democratic businessman, a recent Democrat. But this is one where, this is part of the red wave, that was Ronald Reagan territory for decades. Hillary Clinton started to pick up more of this county.
Dana Rohrabacher actually started as a speechwriter for Ronald Reagan. Let's take the card for the California 45th and show that a very tight race, 7,000 votes at last check separating these two candidates. Mimi Walters, who is the representative now there, you see the incumbent, widened her lead a little bit here, 7,175 votes now. Reed?
Yeah, so Irvine is an inland Orange County district. Upper income, upper middle class, a lot of diversity there, whether or not it's Anglo, Latino, Vietnamese. There's a lot of different people there in that district now.
The headline, it seems, Willie, out here, out west right now is Montana. Let's take a live look at those numbers. It's been a little while since we've spoken directly about President Trump. I want to go ahead and talk about him here. He's been out to this state, I think, 4 times since becoming president. He's invested in this race. Clearly, it's made a difference.
It has, and I think the one thing you've been able to see tonight, especially in these Senate races, is that Donald Trump is able to motivate and energize his base voters. And I think Montana is a really good example of that. I think in Texas with Ted Cruz, it was the same thing. When the president showed up, he was able to really make that difference, which will really, beholden these guys to the president when they get to Washington.
What do you make as a political strategist when you look at the voting numbers when it comes to these Senate races? Democrats with some 10 million votes more, Republicans picking up seats. What does that say for 2 years from now?
Sure. Well, a couple of things. One, remember that there are 2 Democrats running in California here, as Noah mentioned earlier. So that's 4.3 million votes for Democratic Senate candidates. So it's not exactly an apples-to-apples thing. I think when it comes to 2 years from now, the Democrats have to solve for the same problem they had in 2016, which is there are 10 to 12 battleground states, most of them in the middle of the country, and those are the places they have to win. They're going to win California. They're going to win New York. They have to figure out how to win these other places.
And that was the problem, of course, 2 years ago. Willie, as we sort of look at this breakdown, if you are like Steve Kornacki, if you are a geek on politics, stay tuned with us. We got the California 10th, the 25th, the 39th, the 45th, the 48th. Look, Beto O'Rourke told me in Texas that Texas is so red, you can see it red from outer space. Well, California is the same, although it's so blue, you can see it from outer space. We'll see how these races turn out.
Hey, let me ask you before we let you go. You guys were having a conversation earlier tonight about a blue wave, what that means, what it might look like. Did we see a blue wave tonight?
I think we saw more of like a blue lap pool with maybe an elderly gentleman.
We really downgraded that one, Reed. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Look, it feels, Willie, you know, when we spoke about this a couple weeks ago, it feels like we saw exactly what we were going to expect. We saw the House turn the way the House was expected. The Senate math for Democrats was always going to be incredibly difficult. Some of these gubernatorial races are going to be very important going forward, certainly when we talk about 2 years from now. But really, I think it was as expected. Montana is a little bit of a surprise. That one is really, really tight, and it's tight going down late.
All right, Cal, Reed, thanks so much, guys. We appreciate it. Dave Wasserman with the Cook Political Report has pulled up a chair at the end of the table. Does it matter if it was a wave or not? I don't even know how we're defining the blue wave anymore. It was a very popular term coming into the night, but they got control of the House, did Democrats, which was the objective tonight. So does the wave part matter?
This was a suburban revolt, but it was mostly limited to the suburbs.
Right.
And look, the Senate was always going to be decided by these red rural states where Democrats were on defense. The House was always going to be decided by these suburban Whole Foods districts and Panera districts, if you will, where Republicans were on defense. And so this theme of divergence really rang true tonight. Now, yes, Stacey Abrams and Beto and Andrew Gillum lost their races most likely, but what they did was, I think, energize a lot of Democrats that ended up voting in those key congressional districts in places like suburban Dallas and Houston and suburban Miami, by the way, where Democrats picked up some key bellwether House seats tonight. And those races in Georgia also look very close late in the evening.
I would also say, looking down the road, they established a new face of Democratic leadership. There now feels all of a sudden like there is a bench of Democratic leadership. And my question to you, Elise, would be, is there the same for Republicans? I mean, who was elected tonight that can go toe-to-toe with Donald Trump?
Of Republicans, I think we've seen that if you try to go toe-to-toe, you dropped out, you didn't win your race, or the outlier case, South Carolina won. And so I would be curious what you make of Mark Sanford getting primaried, and then the candidate who replaces him loses to a Dem in a district that voted for Romney, I think, by maybe 13 points.
I was in Charleston a week ago, and I met with both the candidates when I was there. It struck me that Joe Cunningham looks like a country music star, the Democrat who won that seat, while Katie Arrington came across as still on this crusade against Mark Sanford for having been vocally opposed to Trump. And she was upset that she thought Sanford was working behind the scenes for the Democrat in that race. And you look at the result, maybe it did turn out to be a referendum on offshore drilling, as the Democrat there wanted it to be. But that's one that stands out as a big pickup for Democrats.
I'll never forget the day after that race, Mark Sanford was on Morning Joe with us, and I said, what's your message to Republicans after your experience here? And he said, I hate to say it, but don't cross Donald Trump. He was very blunt about that. But then she lost tonight. There's the result right now. Katie Arrington, the Republican, has lost to the Democrat in South Carolina's 1st district. That's Joe Cunningham winning there again. That was Mark Sanford's district. Alan, you've been standing by patiently for us. Your big picture thoughts on the night.
I want to tell you the hidden meaning of these midterm elections for 2020. As you know, I have a system called the Keys to the White House that have correctly forecast the results of every presidential election since before you were born in 1984. And as a result of this midterm, the incumbent Republicans who hold the White House lost a key the mandate key, which is measured by midterm House elections. That's another key down. And this midterm also put a second key in jeopardy, the scandal key, because everybody is talking about the House Democrats now having investigatory power, having the subpoena power. And if they and the special counsel uncover really damaging information about Donald Trump, another key drops. So while Donald Trump has called this a tremendous victory, in fact, it has significantly undermined his chances to win in 2020.
Well, first of all, thank you for shaving 10 years off my age. I want to thank you for that. I appreciate that. And quickly, but don't you believe there's the argument that Donald Trump now has a foil in Nancy Pelosi, that he has someone in the House of Representatives that he can fight with, and he likes nothing more?
Oh, I think he'll like that. But this is conventional thinking. You know, conventional thinking says it's the speeches, it's the debates, it's the ads, it's the adversarial conflicts that decide a presidential election. The keys to the White House prove that is absolutely false. It is the big picture that decides presidential elections, midterm election results, scandal, the state of the economy, foreign policy, all the things that the keys gauge. The keys also suggest that the Democrats would be making a monumental mistake by picking in 2020 a so-called safe establishment electable candidate like Joe Biden. They did that with Walter Mondale, Michael Dukakis, Al Gore, John Kerry, Hillary Clinton. And what do all those candidates have in common? Every single one of them lost. There is a charisma key for the challengers. No old party Warhouse is going to win it. The Democrats need someone new,
Jordan here,
like
just
Beto
with a quick
O'Rourke.
question. To pick up on something that you were saying that Democrats shouldn't try to pick a more centrist candidate in 2020. Yet tonight, you look at a lot of the losses, and all of the so-called progressive candidates pretty much lost.
That's not what I said. What I said was they shouldn't pick an establishment candidate, a so-called electable candidate. I said nothing about ideology. What they need is a Barack Obama in 2008, a Bill Clinton in 1992, an exciting new face who is capable of galvanizing the electorate. That's another key. It's called the challenger charisma key. It's the only key under the control of the challenging party. And let's not, if you're a Democrat, make the mistake of deciding who you think is electable and picking, again, a Dukakis, a Kerry, a Gore, a Clinton.
Alan, I've got to jump. I love the keys to the White House. I got to jump in for 1 second here because we now have a call to make at 3:32 in the morning in the Wisconsin governor's race. Tony Evers has done it. He is the apparent winner in that governor's race, defeating Scott Walker, who has won twice and another time when he held off the recall election. Scott Walker goes down in the state of Wisconsin to Tony Evers. Your reaction?
This is a solace for Democrats in governor's races after Gillum and what looks like Abrams. So big pickup for Democrats here.
Should we be surprised by that result? It was tight, we knew going in, but did you feel like Walker was going to pull it out?
I always put a thumb on the scale for Evers in that contest, and you know what? These governor's races are going to be hugely important for the next round of redistricting.
And this is an indication of the long game of grassroots organizers. We forget all of the unions and folks who came out just a couple of election cycles ago against Scott Walker, and this is the kind of culmination of that momentum on the ground. This is huge. That we're seeing the back of his head. This is huge.
Noah Rothman, Scott Walker has been sort of tap dancing through the state of Wisconsin, just barely surviving several times over the years. He ran out of luck tonight.
Yeah, and it's probably not much of a surprise, but it's still devastating from the conservative perspective, given how successful he has been in governing as a conservative in a state that is otherwise previously rather hostile towards conservative governance. I wanted to briefly touch on something Dave said, because that is, to me, the big takeaway of the night. Republican gains over the course of Barack Obama's presidency were so substantial and so important to them as a party because they focused very much on the state state level, on legislative level, on the gubernatorial level. We saw some Democratic gains on the legislative level, some chambers in New Hampshire, for example, and Minnesota, and New Mexico, but we haven't seen really the kind of dramatic gains that we saw in 2010, 2012, even in 2014. And with the loss of governors in places, or Democratic challengers in places like Florida, Ohio, and Iowa, it suggests that, heading into 2020, and especially for decennial reapportionment in 2021, that Democrats are not going to be enjoying the kind of gains that Republicans made in such a short period of time under Barack Obama.
We can now add Tony Evers, the Democrat in Wisconsin, to the list of Democratic pickups tonight in governor's mansions across the country. Add to the list Illinois, Kansas, New Mexico, Michigan. Republicans tonight are celebrating wins in the state of Florida, in Ohio, and perhaps we may learn tomorrow in the state of Georgia. Much more ahead when we come back. We're watching the coast. It's 12:39. It is 3:39 in the morning where we're sitting in our studio here at Rockefeller Plaza in New York City. Thanks for staying up with us. Our coverage of a major midterm flip continues right now. I am Willie Geist. We already know Democrats will take control of the House of Representatives. We're still waiting on results from some late races before we know by just how much. The Democrats already passed the minimum net gain of 23 to lock up the majority, now trying to run that up. Republicans, meanwhile, still in control of the Senate. A few late races still too close to call will determine the margin of victory. Looking right there at the Arizona Senate race, Martha McSally, the Republican, Kirsten Sinema, too close to call. The split there, about 22,000 votes. In the state of Florida, back here on the East Coast, 38,000 votes or so separate Governor Rick Scott, the Republican, and the incumbent Democrat Bill Nelson. We're still waiting to call that one. In Montana, 2,425 votes between the incumbent Democrat John Tester and the Republican Rosendale in the state of Montana. Just within the last hour, we've been able to project that Jackie Rosen, the Democrat, will be the next senator from the state of Nevada come January, knocking off the Republican incumbent Dean Heller there. In Nevada's governor's race, Steve Sisolak, a Democratic gain, a pickup there, another in the Democrat category in the governor's mansions as well. We have two late calls in Nevada that we can make there. As I said, the NBC Decision Desk projecting Democrat Jackie Rosen unseating Dean Heller. She's already made her speech. Dean Heller, the Republican, has already conceded there. So let's bring back in. Do we have Kornacki over there? We don't have Kornacki at the board. You hate when Kornacki disappears because he hasn't left the board, so we worry about him when he's not there. He hasn't left for about 24 hours. But joining our conversation, Maria Teresa Kumar, president of Voto Latino and an MSNBC contributor. Susan Del Percio, Republican strategist and an MSNBC political analyst. Also with us, Elise Jordan, and joining us, Adrian Elrod, former director of strategic communications for Hillary Clinton's 2016 campaign. And down at the end of the table, Dave Wasserman. Good morning. Welcome to you all.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning. Okay, we've agreed it's morning now.
It is morning.
Maria, let's talk about the kind of candidate that won tonight. We were talking in the break about a young candidate. We were talking about women. We were talking about historic firsts as well.
Well, for the very first time, we're about to vote in 100 women in Congress all in one time. 22 women are new. They've never been part of Congress. We're going to be sending in the first 2 Muslim American women into Congress, the first Native American woman. 600 millennials ran for office, mostly Democrats, and that means that all of a sudden the Democrats are actually refreshing a bench, and that should be a lot of excitement, because we're not only talking about, yes, Congress, but we're talking about filling state houses. That's a big deal when it comes to redistricting that is going to be on the horizon in 2020.
So if you're a Republican, and you are, Susan,
I am.
And you're looking at what happened tonight, the loss of the House and all that means for President Trump, and the pushback that Jerry Nadler, who will lead the Judiciary Committee, has already said he's going to apply on the President of the United States. How are you feeling today? You picked up some seats in the Senate. You picked up some governor's mansions. How are you feeling?
If you're Donald Trump, you're really scared. Or at least very concerned, because you will have to deal with Nancy Pelosi and a lot of new chairs, especially when it comes to the Intel Committee, too. We're going to see changes. Nunes is out. His protector-in-chief is out. So that's going to be problematic. But just one thing I also think is, if you look at tonight's results and you're Donald Trump looking towards 2020, what really has to concern you is he wrung out every vote he could for Republicans. Republicans had no growth. And just based on what we heard just now, Democrats are growing with millennials, they're growing with Hispanic, everywhere. There's a lot of prospecting for Democrats to go to. Republicans have none, and that's the most concerning thing, I think, at this point, if you're looking towards 2020.
We'll also add to the list of new faces veterans. A number of veterans winning tonight. Max Rose over in Staten Island.
And many of them who ran as Democrats, not as Republicans.
Max Rose, a Democrat.
1 out of 6 voters that came out to vote were new voters. And most of them were Democrats.
Yeah. Adrienne, what about from your perspective? Susan Del Percio gives us the point of view of the Republican and what Donald Trump might be feeling tonight. What about from where you're sitting as a Democrat? How does it feel?
You know, it feels great. I was actually working at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee in 2006 when Democrats flipped the House, so that was a very exciting evening, and this feels almost the same. As Maria Teresa Kumar pointed out, Democrats have a major advantage demographically. More women are voting for Democrats. More millennials are voting for Democrats. We're expanding our base. We're expanding the map. And we're also expanding our bench for the future. We are building a new generation of elected officials who will help lead the party for generations to come. And I think that's another thing that we can't look over tonight.
Alexi McCammon still with us from Washington, D.C. Alexi, oh, she's not here. Okay, I made that up. Maybe some wishful thinking. Maybe she'll join us in our next segment. Let's talk about, though, the makeup of Congress now, Dave, and what it means for the President of the United States. We've talked about Jerry Nadler at Judiciary. Nancy Pelosi obviously gets the gavel back. Adam Schiff, who's been pining to run the Intel Committee and now gets that chance, has already been on our air on MSNBC tonight talking about his plans to protect Bob Mueller and his investigation. This is a completely different dynamic in Washington.
Yeah, and the margin of the majority for Democrats has always mattered as much as the majority for purposes of determining who the speaker will be and the direction of the party in the House. And there were 37 Democrats who were on the DCCC's list of endorsees who pledged that they would not vote for Nancy Pelosi for Speaker. Now, we're still tallying up how many of those Democrats are headed to Congress, but if Democrats only have a majority of, of 10 or 12 seats, then it's possible Nancy Pelosi won't have 218 votes to become Speaker. She has held the line in some respects against this, drive of the base to impeach the president, but the Democrats could come under heavy pressure from their base over the coming 2 years to go to more drastic measures.
That's such an interesting point. We haven't heard the word impeachment yet. Over the first couple of hours we've been on the air, Elise. Nancy Pelosi has been very careful to stay away from that word, but there is a wing, as Dave says, of the Democratic Party who says the reason we want the House back is to get rid of Donald Trump through impeachment.
Well, and politically, that was a smart move on Nancy Pelosi's behalf, because that just really riles up the Republican base, and also Democrats who are frustrated with Congress not getting anything done. It doesn't necessarily appeal to them, the idea of starting impeachment proceedings. And so that was the right instinct on her part. Whether other Democrats are going to be able to show similar restraint now that they're in power remains to be seen.
But she did also throw something out there. She did say tonight, or through people with her approval, that they will get Donald Trump's taxes.
Right.
So that was kind of just sweetening the pot to say, look, I'm willing to go aggressive to those 37 new members who may challenge her. But that was a little sweetener for them to say, we're going to go on offense.
But I think what we're going to see right now is the president is going to try to stress test the system, see how far he could actually push it. And what we may have, if Nancy
he can't push it any further.
No, but he can. And I think that is the challenge, is that I think that the Democrats really have to walk this plank very carefully, because if immediately they start saying impeachment, then all of a sudden he starts winning in a very big way. And we could actually be in a constitutional crisis. So my recommendation would be for them to literally just start investigating all their cabinet members one by one, because every single one of them has their hand in the cookie jar, and that allows the president to continue his path, but he doesn't have any power.
And it's worth pointing out, impeachment goes nowhere with the Senate.
Exactly.
Now you've actually added a couple of Republican seats. Alan Lichtman, is it too much to think? Let's imagine a scenario now where Donald Trump, the President of the United States, has Nancy Pelosi to deal with as the Speaker of the House, and things start to get done, or are we just in for more gridlock here? Because Donald Trump likes to portray himself as a deal maker, the kind of person who wants to get in a room with somebody and cut a deal. Is there hope that some of that may now happen?
Absolutely. Look, one thing you got to understand about Donald Trump is the man has no ideology and no principles. What Donald Trump cares about is Donald Trump. And what Donald Trump thrives on, aside from controversy and division, is wins. And as long as he can get a win, he doesn't really care how he gets it or what the ideological makeup of that win might be. If it means dealing with the devil, Nancy Pelosi, then deal with the devil. And he could possibly deal with the devil on infrastructure, on prison reform, and maybe even go back to that compromise on immigration reform that he rejected several months ago. Absolutely do not underestimate the fact that Donald Trump can turn on a dime. He can turn in an hour, in a day, in a week. Don't presume he's going to stand by principle.
And Nancy Pelosi was asked today about how she might work with Donald Trump. She said infrastructure. That seems to always be the place we start with. Infrastructure, something we can agree needs a lot of work. A lot more to come here on MSNBC. We are live right through the night, and we'll talk about some of the key issues that drove voters in record numbers to the polls tonight. We're coming right back live on MSNBC.